mine. Grape, strawberry, raspberry, or lemon. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I'm boring.
Get out of here. Sister Karlien, boring? I don't think so. All right, so what do you say? Let's get to it.
All right, do I put these on?
Yeah, that's a good idea, just so that we can hear each other a little better. So the wired side is going to be on your left.
Now, what happens if you make a mistake? I mean, do you edit these at all, or what do you do? Just, this is what it
Well,
is.
the thing about a podcast is that it's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be, I don't know, a more human experience where we get to see the imperfections of us and the experience itself. So don't feel like it has to be perfect. When it comes to the editing, I'm pretty much going to try to keep it as natural as this right here is.
Okay. I sound like I'm underwater right now.
How's that? Can you hear me all right?
I can.
Did you get it a little louder?
No, I think that's good.
I hear you pretty good.
I'm just not used to the heads.
Yeah, it takes some getting used to. All right, so Sister Karlien, I'm so glad you're here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here on this beautiful morning, so thank you for having me.
Yeah, so the number one question that jumps out to me, being a Sister of Mercy, is what exactly does that commitment mean to you, and what exactly does it entail?
Well, not all religious communities take 4 vows. The Sisters of Mercy do take a 4th vow. And the 4th vow we take is service, that we promise that all the days of our life that we would serve. So I feel very committed to the ministry of education and the ministry of caring for the poor. And it just feels like, it's a lifestyle. It's vows like any other vows that are comprehensive, that it covers your life. So you make a decision based on what's good for the common good in terms of the community, your religious community, but in terms of the world as well. So it's a good life. Fewer and fewer people are choosing it, I think, because there's so many different things happening in the world. But my mom asked me recently would I do it again, and indeed I would. It's very liberating. I feel like I can be myself. It's not without limitations. I've had my share of bitter tears with any lifestyle. But I love the women that I walk with and the women that have inspired me and are committed to doing right, committed to living good lives, committed to caring for the others and caring for the earth.
So, you know that I'm not necessarily of the Catholic faith myself, so you got to tell me a little bit more about these vows because I'm really not familiar with them.
Well, we take 4 vows. We take a vow not to be married, and I see that as my vow to love. We take a vow of obedience, and I see that as my vow to pray and to listen. We take a vow of poverty, and I see that as my vow to share. And we take a vow of service, and I see that as my vow of every choice I make to have it be serving others. So we take the vows, and they're until you die vows. They're permanent. For me, sort of the hardest part about taking the vow, we laugh about it, but I think community life might be the biggest challenge of the vows. So I also live with a group of women. They're currently older. They haven't been older their whole life. We've been together for 28 years, and we're committed to living simply. We live in the city. I live with a 97-year-old, a 90-year-old, and 92-year-old. So it's about caring for one another. I don't know. It's an anomaly. It's a hard lifestyle to explain. You understand it if you live it. It's hard to tell somebody about it.
I feel like I might have had just a peek into that window because I think you remember that I had a chance to go to the Nazareth farm trip. So
oh, sure. Exactly.
That's what one of the things that they really pride themselves on there, their cornerstones, and one of which was simplicity. So getting to live a simpler life there, it's definitely changed my outlook on the way that I live my life at home now. Mm-hmm. So, like, for example, I think I took 1 shower that week, mm-hmm. which has definitely helped me cut back here. You're always cognizant of where the lights are on. Mm-hmm. Anytime you leave a room, you always turn them off. Mm-hmm. And it's just little things like that you don't think that they make a big difference, but if everybody starts participating in those practices, they can really add up.
It's a discipline, in the best sense of the word. I think a mindfulness discipline.
Now, you referenced obedience and prayer. So one of the things that I think especially jumps out to me is that as somebody who teaches theology at an all-girls Catholic school, not all of your students are Catholic. So have you ever found that the students who aren't necessarily the Catholic faith are not maybe, do they take away something different from your classes than you feel like your Catholic students would?
I think sometimes you find some resistance and some pushback. I find actually more pushback probably from my students that are raised Catholic and they feel like it's been pushed down their throat or whatever. I think students know when you respect them, and I think if we can respect differences, I could get in trouble for this, but there are more than one ways to get to God. I don't tell the Catholic Church, but we don't have, God bottled up. We don't have Jesus bottled up. He doesn't belong to us. So I am very respectful of our Muslim students. I'm respectful for my kids that are searching. We have kids that are, they love to say that they don't believe. And I think you have to just be okay with it. I remember a student with their arms crossed stood in front of me and said, "Sister, you might as well know right now I don't believe in God." So I just looked at her and I said, "Well, God believes in you. Have a seat." And it's not a debate. And I've learned from my students. I don't have all the answers. I don't even have all the questions. So I don't expect to be changing kids and making little Catholicettes out of them. They take what they take, and I get from them as well. I want, if a student is going to be a Hindu, I want her to be a good Hindu. If a student's a Muslim, I want her to be, and if a student is searching, I want her to search well. I want them to be their best, true, self-realized person that they can possibly be. And if any way I can facilitate that and walk with them, I'm not afraid of their questions. And I'm pretty candid with the kids. Like, the kids will ask me something and I usually say, I have two answers. My first answer is, I have no idea. And my second answer is my own experience and my educated guess. But I think when the kids see that they say that, I see me being vulnerable and not being, I don't have the answers. I don't have the questions.
I think that's really humbling, and that's something that a lot more teachers, I think, should try to portray, is that idea of humility, because I've seen too many young teachers that go into a classroom and they have this idea, and I had the same idea at first, and I got rid of it real quick, that you have to have all the answers. That if you set yourself up in that way, then I don't know. It feels like you're overwhelming yourself. You're setting yourself up for failure. You got to show the kids that it's okay to be human, to not know everything, and to, like you say, be searching. So whether or not that's in faith or in academics, I think that's huge.
And you know what? I didn't start out being a teacher like that. I've evolved. I've been doing this for a while. So you end up being a better teacher as you grow, as you know yourself better. I'm not the same teacher I was initially. I love the kids, and I love the kids then too, but I've made mistakes, and I've learned humility because of the kids. The kids will make you humble.
So tell me more. You've been a theology teacher for how long?
I just finished my 40th year. My 40th
That's a milestone.
Year. That's a milestone. It was pretty incredible because the years go fast. The first 4 and then 40. Education has changed so much in that time. And like I said, I've grown. But if you think 40 years, that's a couple of generations. I figure I've taught 4,000 students.
And I think that you've told me that you've taught daughters of past students. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah.
To see it come full circle, it's got to be something.
Yeah, I almost always have a student in the building that they taught their dad or their mom. And my first students are 54, 55 years old.
That's pretty wild.
So some of my first students are retiring. You know what I'm saying?
Now, did you always know that you wanted to teach when you became a Sister of Mercy?
I didn't know as a young woman what I wanted to do, and I really hadn't thought about religious life. I didn't grow up. I went to public school, and I went to public school city, and I went to some rough city schools. I was in 3 different grammar schools, 3 different high schools. I was during a time when there was a lot of racial tension, frankly, and I left the public system because of the violence, and I went to Mercy. I went home and I said, "Dad, I'm scared to go back." And he said, "Get a job and go to Mercy." That was his response. And so I did. I got a little job at a little bakery, and in those days you could pay, if you saved your money, you could pay your own tuition. So I went to Mercy, the school that I now teach in. I went there to avoid violence. I didn't go looking for Jesus, and I sure wasn't looking to be a nun. And it changed my life. I was touched very deeply by what I saw. And I remember it was May 17th of my senior year. I remember looking at one of my teachers and saying, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I want to have her passion. Whatever I do, I want to have her passion. And religious life for the first time occurred to me. And it hit me. I was like, whoa. And I didn't want it.
When you first started at Mercy, you didn't find yourself to be especially religious?
And, we were Catholic. We went to church because we were made to go to church. No. I went. But I really, for the first time, claimed took my own religious spirituality seriously. It needed my attention. And for whatever reason, it was just the right time in my life, which is why I feel so committed to the juniors, because I came as a junior. So I really feel like if I can identify with any level, I remember the awakening I had. Just sort of, it's a turning point. You become a young woman in loosest sense of the word, because very young, a very, very young woman. But I was looking at things, and for the first time, myself saying, what is it? Why do I believe? What do I believe? When do I believe? How do I believe? And so it's grown from there.
That's inspiring. So did you notice a big difference? I mean, I'm sure that there were massive differences, but what are some of the things that really stood out when you started at Mercy compared to your public school?
I felt safe. I felt safe. It was very hard to break in. It's hard to break into an all-girl environment anyway. I'm not sure I ever did. I mean, I made some friends, but some of these kids have been together since they were potty trained. They've been together their whole whatever. But I just literally physically felt safe in the building. Now, I almost left. I was probably 3 or 4 weeks into school, and a teacher handed a pile of math papers to a student and said, could you return these? And the student looked at her and said, I don't know all these kids. And I went crazy. This is junior year. And I stood right up and said, how could you not all know? There's 140 of us. How could we not all know each other? And you guys are so cliquey. And I just, I got on my soapbox. It was not pretty. And I decided I was going to leave. So I walked out, and I went to my locker, and I rode a bike. So I was getting my bike clothes on, and a teacher who saw me in the hallway. She was like, where are you going? I said, I'm going home. So she kind of walked me off the plank, and I ended up staying. But an all-girl environment is totally different from co-ed. Technically, a city school compared to not a city school. I was still a city kid, so I had a hard time fitting into a school that had some students with money. Majority of kids from suburban areas. The education I was more challenged. I had more homework. But again, I just felt emotionally safer and physically safer.
And do you feel that made it easier for you to succeed and for you to thrive as a student?
No question. I probably would not have gone to college if I hadn't gone to Mercy, hadn't gone to that all-girl environment where I felt safe and supported and academically challenged. And I then was in a climate where everybody was going to college. I'd come from a place where few went to college. Now everybody was going. It was the expectation. Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go? Where are you going to go? So there was a lot of pressure on me. Now I'm the fourth of 7 children. I was the first in my family anywhere to go to college. Just wasn't the expectation. 2 older brothers and an older sister weren't college bound, so I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So it changed absolutely the direction of my life, no question.
No, I think it's interesting that you bring up the point of the expectation of going to college, because for me personally, that is, I think, one of my biggest issues that we currently have with education is this expectation of where are you going to school. I've stopped asking kids that. The question that I ask them now is, what are your plans after high school? Because we've got so many bright kids out there that I don't necessarily think college is best for them.
Yeah, I think we now have an expectation and sort of a narrative that all kids go to college, and so I think personally, we've watered down college so that everybody can fit into the all, and I think that's unfortunate. I also think there's vocational. There's just a lot of good fits for kids that we aren't exploring. The expectation is, where will you go to college?
And I actually just had a chance to talk to our friend Mike Metzler yesterday, and we were talking about this very same thing. And he thinks that one of the things that's causing this expectation to go to college is the fact that there are ranking systems out there, not just in colleges, but in high schools too, because one of the criteria that you need in order to be ranked as a top high school is you have to have a high percentage of students that are going to college immediately after. So when we have those expectations, we have these ranking systems that administrators want to see themselves at the top of that list.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you're creating a culture that if you're not going to college after high school, you're somehow a failure. And I don't think that that's the case in any way, because the one student that sticks out to me, and I'm sure you know, she's taking a gap year, is Rory. And I don't think that you or I would say that in any way, shape, or form she is a failure for doing so. I think that honestly, it'll be one of the best decisions she's ever
She's
made.
a cool kid.
She is. She's a really bright kid. And I'm trying to get her on here. One of these
Get
days.
her on here.
I want to.
You tell her. You call her and say, Sister Karlien said get in there. No, she's a wholesome. She's an excellent example. Too bad the audience doesn't know the student we're talking about, but bright, articulate, but knows herself well. So for her to choose a gap year, I'm just going to honor that, because she's a kid who's got a lot of insight, and she's a great example.
And I just caught wind yesterday that she is delivering the speech at graduation. Did you hear that?
No.
Her, Princess, and who's the third? Laura Juno. Those are the three speakers at graduation. Yeah.
Well, they would have had my votes.
Yeah. Hey, they got mine.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, I got to know Rory pretty well. I never actually had her as a student, but she was part of the Nazareth farm trip, and she was a part of my work group, and we got to know each other really well. So, yeah, to see that she's taking a gap year, I've got a lot of confidence in her.
She helps younger students. She's a great mentor naturally, and she doesn't even work at it. She just is a good example to me. That's an example of a student who I feel like I've learned from. I think if a teacher does not have the attitude that, what can these students teach me, then I think you got to get out of the classroom.
But I think that that's probably one of the reasons that you and I are attracted to working with a certain age group that we do, and that would be 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, where they already have a bit of a value system that they've developed, and they're still grinding away and chiseling in a way to figure out what exactly it is that they believe. But she's one that I feel like has come to those conclusions a little quicker than most. And
she's got an uncanny maturity.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things that I had to ask you about is, as a Sister of Mercy, if I'm not mistaken, you are a part of the development of the critical concerns of mercy. Is that correct?
Yes. Actually, the critical concerns of mercy comes not from school, but comes from the sisters. So the sisters across the United States of America, Central America, South America, there's 12 countries that come together, and we came together, and I was actually part of that meeting. Each area votes for who they want to send, and so I was fortunate and privileged to be voted in as a speaking member. It's what's called a chapter, and so that goes back to, I don't know, 2003 maybe. And when we got together, we all had these concerns were critical to us. So everyone's hanging on to their critical. So everybody put it on the table, and we ended up having 5. Like one person said, no, the most critical concern is immigration. So the most critical concern is the earth. The most critical concern is unrecognized racism. And so everybody had their passion, and they kept pushing their agenda. And so finally we said, well, let's just embrace the 5 of these things. And what we committed to is that all of our institutions, our hospitals, our homeless shelters, our food pantries, and certainly our educational institutions, colleges, elementary and high school, would embrace those. And it's been a learning process, because we embrace them. What does that mean? Could the school that I teach at, could we recycle better? We could. So we teach one thing, and then students call us out.
And I appreciate that. I absolutely appreciate that. And they absolutely do. And that's, I think, something that they really embody in their motto projects, is that they're looking for, what are the things around this school, around my community, that I can see a way that I can make it just a little bit better.
Yeah, where's the integrity? We had a large group of our alum call us out on Black Lives Matter issues.
I think I saw something about that.
Came back and said, hey. And at first, you want to get defensive. And I met with them. I sat down, and we went to the Frederick Douglass statue in Highland Park, and we had a conversation and talked for 2 hours. And the kids are right. It's about what don't we recognize? I mean, that's the issue of the racism, unrecognized. So if we're going to have these critical concerns, the kids, how do I want to word this, used them against us. They held up the mirror and they said, you know, sister, you said these are a critical concern. And they're right. So we had to move on it. Then we had some conversations and some dialogue. And I think there was some administration feeling a little vulnerable. But I said, we've got to listen to these kids. And it ended up being a real growth.
So where did they feel that the school was coming up short, and what is it that they expected?
You know, it's a bunch of things, and I hate to say little things because they're not little, because they add up. But it was just choices that we make. It's that unrecognized piece. So how do we advertise our school, and how do we see ourselves, and how are we deliberately inclusive to different cultures? You know, instead of just saying, come join us, we're all Anglo, be like us, and, you know, come for the ride. So I would say these are mature students. They were all alum. I'm not sure, and this isn't fair, but I'm not sure when they were with us, they had the same clarity. But looking back, the clarity was very, a choice that we had made during Black History Month. You know, Black History Month is not about putting up a poster or two and rah-rah, but also just looking at our curriculum. So I'll give you an example. I teach a whole thing on forgiveness. So we've got a wonderful example in John Lewis, who just recently died, on forgiveness. So when I teach forgiveness, I want to make sure that I am using examples cross-culturally. He's a wonderful role model for us as a nation, certainly for the classroom. So, you know, and what he's forgiving is Klansmen. So I think it's a way to teach better the context of, you know, I don't want us to have an African-American course. We should have, it should be so better integrated into our whole education. It's not like a separate history. It's American history. So we just need to do a better job in whatever we teach to use examples beyond what we're drawn to. As an Anglo woman, I'm going to be drawn to the Anglo example. I got to be more deliberate about saying, what were the Native American examples, and you know, how would this be for an Asian student, and just to be more deliberate. I feel like I'm awake now, somewhat, and I need to do better.
And that's something that we're all trying to work on. I think that this whole Black Lives Matter movement, it's showing us that, you know, this is not just an issue here in America. This is a worldwide issue.
Yeah.
Racism needs to end, and it needs to be done.
And it's not going to happen until we, you know, look at it and say, what don't I recognize? What don't I see? Because if I stand here and say I'm not racist, I don't want to be racist. What don't I see? What are my choices and habits, and how can I do better? So like the whole thing about Black Lives Matter. People get real defensive and say all lives matter. Well, that's not, they're not saying only Black Lives Matter. They're just getting our attention and having us take a big deep breath and say, yeah, you're right. Black lives do matter. How can we listen better, listen, learn, and act?
And I feel like it's almost as if they're saying they don't feel as if Black lives matter to the same extent just yet. And I think that I would agree with that.
Exactly. And I don't want to be defensive. I want to be open, learn, listen, you know, and how can we grow?
But it's that same sense of humility, not knowing all the answers and being open to new ideas. That's huge. Not just being as a teacher, but as a person.
The kids see it, and they'll call you out on it. You know, they call you out on and you have to let them.
Yeah, and we got to be open to it. You got to be open to criticism. That's huge in the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, when I sat with these young women, they were lovely, and, you know, sister, oh, you were great, and you were, you know, we could come to, and all that. I cried, and I said, that's all true, thank you. But I said, you were in my building, and you felt like we didn't give you the full respect that you as young women, you as young people deserve on my watch. It happened. And for whatever reason, I didn't see it and address it. And so now, you know, 4 years later, 8 years later, you're coming back and saying, sister, this is how we felt. And, you know, I'm partly responsible. I'm part of the problem if I'm really not part of having us all do it better.
So were they able to give you some concrete ideas as to what it is that they'd like to
Curriculum.
see? Yeah.
Curriculum was the big thing, and I love Frederick Douglass. I'm a Rochester girl through and through. So Frederick Douglass lived here for 25 years. You know, we have a huge, long history of Susan B. Anthony. We've got Harriet Tubman. You know, local people who are historical figures. I mean, Harriet Tubman, they talked about putting her on the $20 bill until there's another whole issue we could get into. You know, these are local people, and I've been to the museums and I study it. I'm currently reading the David Blight's book on Frederick Douglass, but I haven't integrated it well into my curriculum. So why? So I just think they called us out on making sure we, you know, the history of slavery in this country is we don't want to talk about it. The Underground Railroad, and you know, it's like the Holocaust. It's not a pretty time in history, but if we don't talk about it and really allow it to be to hurt a little bit, then we're doing a disservice to history, and then disservice to a generation of young minds.
And that seems like that's unfortunately one of the things we're trending towards is this kind of whitewashing history, trying to eliminate all the bad that's ever happened. And yeah, you're right. If you're not looking and reflecting upon what has happened, then how can you learn from it?
I think we've been whitewashing history for a long time.
Don't even get me started on high school textbooks.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying the young people called us out on. And, you know, we've engaged some good conversation with people. I would say we're at the very grassroots, just starting. And so I think we have to admit that. It's not one and done if you form a little club and you're like, this is all over. No, it's going to take us a while to untangle this and to get it right. I think we're going to make mistakes. But I also think we don't do a good job on the native peoples. You know, the history of our native brothers and sisters and how much they're suffering even with this COVID or whatever, to really look at it. And I just think you teach empathy. You teach us to be respectful and, I don't know, take a big deep breath and cherish life better.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it brings me to maybe one of my bigger points would be not just on the idea of racism, but the role that students have in their curriculum. Because I'd say that from everything that I've ever experienced as a student and as a teacher, I don't know that students have much say in that curriculum. And I think that that's something that I really would like to see change, because if we're expecting our students to go to school every day and be invested in their own learning, they probably should have a say in what it is that they are learning. And, you know, we can say that they have choice in which classes they take. And for me, I think it's just a bit too restrictive. I don't know.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I would say the Moral Foundations course that I'm currently teaching, again, has evolved. And again, the students have helped to make that happen. The students do have a choice on which topic they're going to pursue to present to the class. And so there, in that area, they can find their passion, they can find their interest, and they start, you know, the rule is if they're looking into some moral issue and they change their mind, they get to change, you know, I don't have to marry this issue. But I want them to see that everything has a moral implication. The gum that you chew, where does that gum end up? You know, it sounds ridiculous, but I want them to see that every single choice we make has an implication. And so...
Yeah, and that's a really important point. If you're not seeing the interconnectedness of our world and how everything has come to you the way that it is, yeah, that you're
I would like to do I'd like to do a part 2 of that course, because I think I see the students making choices on mass incarceration, or they, you know, what's happening to our oceans, or light pollution. They were all over the place, and so I'd like to have part 2 of that course to say, now that you've gotten this platform, what else would we like to study? And I think they could be directing the curriculum. And they're young, bright minds. They're ready to do that.
We got a great, really, really great student body at Mercy. That's one thing that I can't state enough, is that those students are not only well behaved and motivated, but just great kids.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
really are.
Yeah, it's a privilege. We're spoiled. Don't tell anybody. I mean, when I look at my job, I spend 95% of my energy teaching and maybe 5% on discipline, maybe 2% on discipline. And it's not the students that I teach that I'm disciplining. It's the kids that are yelling in the hall because they run into the lunchroom. So, what teachers can say they spend 2% energy disciplining. In the classroom, you clear your throat and say, time to get going, and they do.
But I get the feeling that the reason that's the case, and I've had a similar experience at Mercy, is that you strike me as the kind of person that, a bit like myself, tries to take care of that stuff on the front end as opposed to on the back end. Where this is what I ended up writing my entire capstone project on when I was at Nazareth College, was that being a good teacher isn't necessarily about knowing all the answers. It's about connecting with your kids and building those relationships, because once they have that feeling that you care about them, they care about you enough to do the work and to really invest their learning.
I totally agree. So when we moved to the online learning in March, I already had a relationship with the kids. I don't know how you do it without relationship. I mean, I think if I said to the students, girls, I'd like to move the building, they'd look at me and I'd say, come on, let's go down. We're just going to push the building a little bit. I want to move it over an inch to get a better sunlight.
They try.
They'd be down there and they'd be looking at each other thinking, she's crazy, she's crazy. Your sister, I'm pushing. And with all their might, they'd be pushing that building. So, I mean, it's a little, talk about humbling. I think we have a huge responsibility. If we build that relationship and they trust you, you cannot violate that. That's a very serious, serious trust. I think that's how you teach based on relationship. If you don't have a relationship, forget it. If you gave me a piece of string and a phone book, I could teach if I have the relationship and the trust.
So what sort of impact do you think that that's going to have for teachers that are having a new cohort of students, a new class this fall, when they might start online completely?
This is, I'm concerned about that for myself as an educator, because relationship is just 96% of teaching. If you have a relationship with the kids, I don't know how you do it without it. Can you build it, through technology? I don't know. It'll be an experiment. I know I was able to be successful with online because, again, the relationship with the kids, I didn't know what I was doing. You know as well as anybody. The kids helped me.
And they're great about that. That's again a testament to the students.
I stood there. I was like, girls, and just as kindly and patiently, and they help each other. If you push that button, if you push this, it took care of itself. I was I was very worried about how am I going to do this, and the kids, I love them.
Yeah, it's a unique thing that you all talk about, the sisterhood at Mercy, and it's so true. And one of the things that I experienced when I was growing up in public school is that you tended to really just stick with kids that were your own age. You really hung out with the kids that were your grade. And at Mercy, I really don't see that. Maybe to an extent, but even when I very first started, I saw freshmen that were hanging out and talking with seniors. And that's a foreign idea to me, but I think that that's a testament to the environment, the culture that's been created there.
Yeah, and girls are hard. I mean, we have to always, help them with that, because I think they can get a little cliquey and a little, I mean, they're prone to making some mistakes too. So we have to be the adult in the room, and they want to get it right. So sometimes you have to just kind of say, well, and that's not right, what's going on. But by and large, the kids are in teams together, and the older kids are helping the younger kids, and there's cooperation over competition much of the time.
And I think that those are life lessons that those girls carry with them. Absolutely. So you had to undergo this transition from classroom learning to virtual learning. You wouldn't call yourself a tech-savvy person, would you?
I would not. No.
So after that experience, because you and we had a chance to learn about how to use video chatting, do you think that that's something that you would continue to do this fall? Has it been laid out clearly for you what Mercy's plan is at this point?
No, it has not. It's going to come. I'm for sure it's going to be a hybrid. There's going to be some in class and some home. I don't know what that's exactly going to look like. I would say the workload for the teacher, for me, and it's because I'm not a techie, I'm a teacher, I found that it doubles the workload easily. It takes time to prepare things and do things differently, to post things. And I think if you're real conscientious, I was answering over 100, 120 emails every single day. Kids asking questions.
All hours of the night, too.
All hours of the night. I mean, I was putting in, I never in my 40 years ever worked harder or longer. And it's not that it was so difficult. It's just it took longer to do. If you want to maintain the relationship. I mean, I could have just, posted stuff and busy work or just boom, boom and not have. But if you want to especially when I'm teaching in theology, it is relationship. You've got to spend the time with the kids. I'll give you an example. I had a student who wasn't getting her work done, and so we were on Google Classroom, which is like Zoom. And at the end, I asked her, I won't use her real name, let's call her Becky just for this. So I said, Becky, I need you to stay on. Becky wasn't doing her work. So the kids all got off, and there's Becky, and she knew she was coming up for a scolding. So I said to her, how's your horse? And she was like, what? I said, well, how's your horse? And she said, well, my horse is good. And I said, are you able to ride, or is it hard? Well, initially we couldn't go to the barn. And she said, but I've gone over now, and well, great. And I said, how's it? Is it traumatic for the horse? So we talked about our horse. Got at the end, and I said, now, Becky, what else am I going to say? And she said, I got to get my work done. I said, yeah, you and the horse have a conversation about that this afternoon. See if you can figure that out. You know, without the horse, I'm not sure I would have gotten through to Becky. You know, so it works because I knew her enough to ask her about her horse. But if you don't know that, how do you do that? So that's just a silly little example, but I think it just takes me a lot longer to really respond to their emails if you want to have a conversation through an email. And then to meet with the kids. I was Google Meeting with the kids all the time, especially they're working on their projects and stuff, and you got to put the time in.
And I don't know about you, but I think that one of the things about email that can be a little restrictive is that it's creating a permanent record of what's happened. And sometimes I feel like the best way to really get through the kids is just sit down and have a conversation. That's more impromptu, and I don't know if you find yourself doing this, but whenever I'm typing an email, I probably reread it and rewrite it about 10 times.
Oh, yeah. My emails usually are like, meet me on Google. That's what my email would say. So it's, you know, yeah, what you put on email should be just the information that they need, but the conversation needs to be a conversation. I'm not a fan of conversation via email.
Yeah, I'm with you on that because...
But the kids were asking me questions like, can I use this church document? And then I would have to look it up, or you say, well, you know, look at the next paragraph. So it was very the function of giving them information, and that took time. But in addition to that, then I'm Google Meeting with them one-on-one, and just the time. I spent 11-hour days. On Sundays, Tuesdays, it didn't matter. Like the days off, I was like, what's that?
Do you think that's something that can be maintained throughout a whole school year?
I can't sustain. It's not sustainable. The sisters I live with said, Karlien, you just got to do it differently. So I would say it worries me. I think online learning has a place. I think it's served its purpose for us. I think going forward we need to do both. I think it's good to teach the kids and the teachers how to use it. But I see myself as having 10 more years of teaching in me, but not if it's this. If it's this, I don't have 10 more years.
So if we go back into the classroom, I know that taking care of older women, of course, you don't want to transmit the disease to them. Do you feel that you can operate safely in a classroom?
I have never dreaded going back to school. I don't like it when the summer's over. I'm like any other teacher, you know. It's like, summer's off and stuff. But I'm always ready and excited and want the energy and seeing the kids. For the first time in my career, I feel a little pocket of, oh no, dread. It's not about the curriculum, not about the kids. It's about the concern for their well-being and my well-being and the sisters I live with well-being. For the first time, I have some real hesitancy, dreading going back to school because it's takes so much more time to do it online, and because the reality is there's a pandemic. Whether people believe it or not, there seems to be one.
And I don't think you're alone in having that doubt and that shadow of anxiety, because there's people that aren't as fortunate to have the setting that we had. So in classrooms that are tighter and that have more students, especially students that might be younger and not as well educated on how it is that they can prevent the transmission of disease, I don't know how it's possibly feasible. I really don't see it happening.
Well, schools are built to be social. That's the point, you know, kids hugging, and I hug kids, especially kids if I've taught them. I would expect that I would hug 90% of the seniors because I taught every one of them. And, you know, now we can't. So how do you make kids that are affectionate and are spontaneous, how do you keep a social distance, really?
I don't know how. And throughout the virtual learning experience, one of the things that I really tried to emphasize was this maintaining a sense of community and maintaining the relationships that we had. And through that, I came to learn that the number one thing that students miss the most was just being able to see and hang out with their friends.
Each other.
It's not anything that a building does. It's about that community, and I don't know that we can maintain that online. I don't know that that can be created to the same extent
Oh,
online. And you
the
know,
long-term impact of all this, we have no clue.
I think it's going to be wider reaching than we anticipate.
And we're not going to know right away. We're going to know some things right away, but other things we're going to know when the kids, are 30 and they're in therapy, unpacking what happened. I think about our seniors that just graduated without a real graduation, without really a closure to the year, without any. Now they're going into their freshman year of college, and they're disappointed with the end of their senior year, and they're disappointed with the beginning of their freshman year. And they got it on both ends. This should be an exciting time that they're packing up, and their living room should be filled with stuff going off to college. They don't know what they're going to be doing. So that generation of kids got hit awfully hard.
Yeah, and being that we know so many of those kids, it hits us hard, I think, as well,
Oh,
to see them going through that. Nobody wants to see one of the kids that would love experience that.
yeah, right. You want to give it, repay them somehow, help them to fix it, and I can't.
So, what sort of reparations can we give, do you think? Is there anything that we can do to try to make that experience more, I don't know, closer to the way that it should be, that we feel?
I think we're trying. I think we're doing this and doing that. But I think it would be a mistake to say the trying has really replaced. Because and no matter what we do, a drive-by, whatever, it's only a portion of what was promised in terms of their dreams, in terms of their hopes and stuff. I think for us not to acknowledge that there's a disappointment, that there is a letdown. I think we have to say, and really be sorry. Not like, oh, you should be grateful for what you have. Or, you start giving that attitude, and it's just not fair. I don't know except to keep loving them, and it's a disappointment. It is, and not
Yeah.
to pretend that it isn't.
Yeah, I think to write it off, you're absolutely right. That's doing those kids a disservice to act like it's something that's not that big a deal. That get by it. You're safe. You're at home. You're healthy. Yeah, no, they're losing out on a big life experience. It's a real shame. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think that I have appreciated the steps that Mercy's taken. So, like you said, we had a little car parade where the students got to drive by and see us, and I think that they're doing a modified version of Rose Mass. And I haven't heard about graduation just yet, but do you have any update on graduation?
Yeah. There's going to be a graduation. They want us to have caps and gowns. They're going to do it on the field.
Okay.
Up in the field, and social distance and stuff, and they have the bishops coming, so they're going to make it a big deal, and I think that's that needs to be applauded. It's it is something, and I think the kids will see the effort of trying, but they also get to say, but this isn't the real thing, right? And we say, no, it's not, but we're trying, and I think the trying counts, but the trying doesn't replace.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if you had a message to those students, what would it be? Speaking to the class of 2020.
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm patronizing, but I think everything we do teaches. I'm a big believer in that. So I didn't want this for them. I wouldn't choose this for them. I'd go back to what I've tried to teach them about, everything has a moral implication. So I would ask them to, how are they going to navigate this by bringing their best true self to it, which includes saying, ouch. I think it will carve out in them some resilience. I think we can foster good, can come of it. If we remain open, and again, we don't talk down to the kids, we let them find their own journey in it, but it can go one way or the other. It's either going to make them bitter or better. And my hope is that somehow better will come of it, and I'm confident. Again, we got a wonderful group of kids.
And I think the reflection is going to be a big part of that. I think that when this is all said and when it's all said and done, we're going to have to just stop and kind of look back and say, what were the ways that my lifestyle changed as a result of this pandemic? Were there any things that I want to keep from it? Or were there things that I maybe realized about the way that I was living my lifestyle that I want to toss away and set aside for good? And I think that that's something that I've definitely found in my own experience with being at home these past 4 months is that I've gotten way back into making exercise a routine part of my lifestyle, eating healthier, and just taking care of myself just because I've had the time. And it's something that I don't think I really appreciated before because I was just always so crunched for time. And I don't know, having a little more time in your hands, it definitely makes you realize what's important.
Well,
Because
the summer's nice because I feel like there's more time in the summer. What I've gotten to is writing letters, and that's a fun. Again, you find time to do something that you haven't had time for in the past.
letters to former students, to Sisters of Mercy.
A variety of things, to grandnieces and nephews, to former students, to who comes to my mind, to some of the young women who called me around the Frederick Douglass statue and said, let's have a conversation. I wrote to one of the kids' colleges, wrote to the provost and just said, I sent you a gem of a kid and you sent me back a more brilliant, So just some different letters. And it's been interesting because I have some nephews and they've written back. So you get something different in a letter. But anyway, that's just an example of how can we do things a little. I think we've been a little more reflective, quite possibly.
And I think it has to do with the amount of time that we have on our hands because there's something about our lifestyle where everything has to be done as quick as possible and on a restrictive time schedule that you don't really have that time to stop and think about the people that you love. And to have a chance to do that, I think that's really important. Yeah, it's given me a chance to get to see my dad a little bit more often, to see my sisters. I was just over and saw my niece and nephew yesterday, so I think those are all good things.
I agree.
But Dad's doing good. You should. You asked about it earlier, and you're probably gonna grimace when I say this, but he wants to go back to work.
Okay.
He'd been out of work for something like 3-4 months, but yesterday was gonna be his first day back, so I went and stopped by to see how his first day was. But I guess it turns out he wasn't feeling so well and wasn't up to going, so he's gonna wait another week and see how it goes.
The fact that he wants to, they gotta let him have the want. So I think that's what's gonna keep him going.
And that's exactly why I against my better judgment, I encouraged him to go back. Cause
yeah, go for it, Dad.
Something to stay motivated, something to look forward to. I think
feels
that's really
a little
important.
bit normal to him. He
Exactly.
can just sit around and be sick and sit around and be weak and sit around and not feel well or say, I got a job to do.
Exactly.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Come from good stock. That's great.
Yeah, I'm hoping he's feeling up to it next week.
For his sake, sure.
Yeah, for his sake. All right, so one of the things that I wanted to get back to was the critical concerns of Mercy, because one of the things that I've come to really appreciate about Mercy was the way that they've been integrated into the curriculum, especially the Motto Project and also into your classes. But it speaks to a larger piece of education, which I think that a lot of schools might be missing, and that's to have a value system that's not just on a poster, but is actually enacted throughout their students. Because, for example, when I was growing up in high school, we had this thing, it was called the Palmac Way, where we had these character traits, things like respect, responsibility, caring. But I don't know that I ever saw any sort of intentional action that was meant to bring out those character traits within us. It was just kind of this idealistic, this is the student that we're looking for. But I think that at Mercy, having the critical concerns of immigration, race, the earth, women, what's the last? I'm forgetting. Racism, of course. By having those issues and the way that students have used them in their Motto projects, it gives them a chance to go much deeper. So what role do you think that having that sort of value system plays in an education?
I think, that whole thing about respect and sharing and all that, those are great theories. And I think they're lofty and they're, you can kind of point to them. But to have actionable actions that can be taken, measurable. What have we concretely done about immigration? So do we have students who have been to Mercy that are undocumented? I'm going to tell you, maybe we have, so that there's, again, concrete, measurable goals that we meet and that we also fall short of. We need to do better about Earth. So what can we do as a school community to compost, to recycle really better, anyway, I think it gives us something that you can say, okay, here's the theory, or here are the goals, but then here's the concrete, measurable actions that can be taken, and also inspire the kids. Like I said, they've used them against us. We had styrofoam. My
But
gosh.
that means they're learning. It
Right,
does. It
right,
means
right.
that they've gained an appreciation to the extent that maybe you hadn't quite thought
Oh,
of
it
yet.
scares me. I mean, literally. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say we had styrofoam in our cafeteria. And the girls brought the styrofoam to my classroom. They're shaking it at me and saying, "What's this?" And they're right. They're absolutely right. So you can't teach, but it's hard to move a larger group of people. But when you have something that you can point to and say, "Well, this is the critical concern says this. Let me read it to you," then we have to move better and maybe a little faster. So it's not just these lofty theories and.
But the way that it's been integrated in the curriculum, it's something that you could speak on better than I could. It's not just that we have these actions that students take and these ideas, but I think at Mercy you guys do a really good job at bridging the two. So would you mind just sharing a little bit more about the critical concerns days and the way that you've integrated those ideas?
Well, we certainly have the day set aside to educate the kids, but we're also trying to step back and to say, what are the books that we're choosing to read? What's the literature the kids are reading in English? So you can choose from a million, choices. Are we choosing types of literature that help the kids have stories of immigration, or help the kids have stories of empowering women, or help the kids have stories, about racism and stuff? So I think we can look across the curriculum and across the choices. But I feel very, very strongly that we're falling short. Like I think you're right, and it's great to see someone say Mercy's done a really good job, and indeed we have. I want to hold up those same critical concerns and say, let's look at our Spirit Day. Let's look at how we celebrate any events that are sacred to us, that are special to us. Are we making sure we're looking through everything through the prism, through the lens? Where are these critical concern lens, and how well? I want us to look through the lens of that when we see what waste have we created on a fun day. Could we create less waste? So I sort of almost feel obsessed by wanting us to be more faithful, that those critical concerns really should be holding our feet to the fire, and it should be the measure, and not a secondary thought. Like sometimes I think we do something, we say, oh, look at this met the critical concern, and I think it should be, we start with a critical concern, not looking back and say, oh yeah, we can cross that off, check the mark that off. I want it to be the first thought in our head is the critical concerns. Now there are 5 of them, so can you get all of them? Well, I think if we can find different people with a passion for each one of those, I think we can continue to improve. But the critical concern about women, it's not against fellas. It's just saying we have a concern about women that have been oppressed throughout the world. I mean, we have women that are being trafficked, and women that are being raped, and women that are not being appreciated, and women that are spending their whole day gathering water for their family in the world. And to have a step back and to say, what percentage of women on the planet, young women, our Mercy girls' age, what percentage of women aren't being educated just because they're women? So, just to have them have a world view of that too, that it's part of the fabric part. You look back in your education, and I'm not sure how many things you can tell me you learned, but you can remember how you felt, and you can remember images, and you can remember saying, I remember the teacher saying I need to be worried about my sister who's carrying water all day long. And to show them pictures, and to show them facts, and to show them, that I think the kids are caught. I think that's where empathy is taught and understood, and then they want to do something about it. They're motivated to say, well, how can I make a difference?
Yeah, and that's when it comes down to school, there's a lot of facts that kids will learn. There's a lot of information that they'll learn. And at the end of the day, a lot of it's in one ear and right out the other. But I think that you go to a bigger point, which is that school is a process about shaping who people become and who they are and how they're going to live their life. So, yeah, without a value system like the critical concerns or something similar, I feel like it's awfully hard to reach that point where you have students that have a sense of who they are and how they want to interact with the world.
There's a huge difference between information and knowledge, and what we want to is empower women to know who they are, to know where they're going, to know where they've been, to know right, to know wrong, to know what's the right thing. So knowledge is very, very different than a bunch of information. Information you can get on your phone. It's in your pocket right now. But that's not the same as knowledge.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree. So, coming back this fall, you got a little anxiety. You think we're going to be flex model. What did you say would be the one thing that you're most excited about?
A new crop of kids.
Yeah.
You know, it's a funny thing. I wouldn't stay in education if I didn't fall in love with the kids. Prior to having them, I got to tell you, they're just a bunch of adolescent kids that are driving me crazy. And and it's not until you have them in front of you that they become my kids. They become your students. You feel invested in them. And so a chance to get another 125 kids that I don't know that will get to know me, that I'll get to know them. And just another crop of kids to learn from and to grow together. And it's fun to watch them. I feel like I've honed my craft. So my favorite course is the moral foundation course, and I get good feedback from the kids because the kids will say that course changed me.
That's the one that I think that I hear the most about is morality.
And it's fun. It's fun because what I say to the kids is, kids, I haven't taught you a thing. I've just told you what you know. And that's how I take that whole course. Is I'm not going to teach you anything in this course. I'm going to tell you what you, in your heart of hearts, the deepest part of who you are, what you already know. I'm just going to hold up the mirror. And so it's a great journey to watch that unfold. I mean, I give them stuff to memorize, and they get tests and stuff, and I make them think. For sure, they have to think. But it's really about them discovering their best self and who they want to be.
And I think that that's one of the things that I really appreciate most about teaching. And I don't know if I ever showed you with this, that I also really get into coaching as well, soccer. And I think that that's the one thing that really draws me to coaching and makes me want to get back out there again, because I haven't in about a year, is that, when you start out, the kids are awfully raw. They have some ideas about what the sport is, but as time goes on, they start to pick up the ideas and they integrate what it is that you share with them, and they learn how to apply it to a situation. And once you see that, and you see that they're achieving their success through what they've learned, that's really rewarding.
That's what keeps you in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, as we're sitting here, we're both wearing our masks just because it's what we're being asked to do these days. So I'm just very mindful of trying to figure out how to teach like this all day. It's warm. It's warm and sticky. So how can I do this for 6 hours? It's a big ask. And, again, I think everything we do teaches. And so you want to model for the kids the safest thing. But it's not comfortable. It feels funny, I'm just... You can get a lot from the students by their reaction. You can tell it's going to be harder to assess. You're just watching eyes. You can get a lot from eyes, but you also, a smirk or a smile or a grimace. You can't. How are we going to catch that? It's a new day.
That would be an awful shame to not get to see what's going on with a kid as far as what their face says about their emotional state. Because that makes it one more barrier to building that type of relationship that we're talking about.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, if it's saving lives, it's saving lives.
Right.
Because I'd say that one of the things that I see as a really big barrier in the classroom is just the ability to work in groups and to collaborate with your classmates. Because that's one of the things that, especially in AP Biology, I found was it's foundational to the way that they learn, is that they have to be able to share their ideas with one another, reform those ideas, correct each other, and that happens when you're tight-knit in a group working together on a lab. When it's free reign. And I get the feeling that if we have this idea of keeping kids spaced apart, it's going to make that much harder.
Yeah, you can't dissect something when you're 6 feet apart. I mean, and I don't just mean physically dissect, but to really look at a problem or look at a solution, and to, if the kids discover something, I think that's when they really learn. If it's in front of them and they have the chance to unfold it and unpack it themselves, and with our guidance and our mentoring, then they remember it. But you're right. How do you do that 6 feet apart?
And then to have those moments and to be able to share it with a classmate who hasn't quite gotten there yet and take them to that step. Those are the moments that we live for.
Right. That's what keeps us in education. That's what I'm saying. I've got either a 10-year plan here or a 2-year plan here.
Yeah. If it was a 2-year plan, would you be awfully disappointed?
I have teaching in me. Like I remember in my younger years saying, gee, I wonder how long I'll teach. I can tell you this, you'll know when it's time. I just hope that when I know it's time, I hope it's at the end of a school year, because when you're done, when you're either burned out or you've done your thing, you need to leave the classroom. When people stay in the classroom and they've been done for a couple of years, the kids detect that, and that's not good at all. So I would leave if I didn't feel like I still had teaching in me, and if it's too frustrating, that's going to come across. I can be temporarily frustrated. I can be, the kids could see it, and I was honest with the kids. Kids, this is not what I want for us. Their ring ceremony day, we put a video together, and the kids were great that worked on it and stuff. So that was fun.
Yeah, but that's not the same as going to the people that you care about and asking them to turn your ring.
I couldn't pretend, and I didn't want to pretend. I said, kids, this is not to replace. This is to honor the fact that we should be in school. We should be turning each other's rings. You should be seeing my junior prom pictures. That we owed you, and we can't give you that. So this is not to replace that. This is just to say, I'm sorry, but let's have it fun. And we ended up having fun, and rah rah rah, I laugh. It ain't the same. I couldn't pretend it was the same.
No. We had a couple of replacement traditions like that, and yeah, I think that it was nice that they were acknowledged that the absolute best scenario, the traditional scenario, didn't get fully acted out, but acknowledgement, I guess that's maybe a step in the right direction. It's never going to replace it, though. So if you were, I don't know if you ever consider this, so when it comes to teaching, I think that one of the things about a virtual model is that it makes it so that you're potentially more available to more people. But from talking to you here, it sounds like it's the personal interactions that seem most important to you. So would you ever consider putting yourself out there as a teacher of a broader audience in an online setting?
Oh, well, the answer to that is absolutely, for brief things. Like I don't even know what I would call it, but I certainly think you can pass on your energy and your passion, your excitement as a lecturer or whatever. I wouldn't do it, I guess, for a short term, like as there was a particular thing I was trying to introduce some foundational things about, moral foundations, basically. But I couldn't pretend to teach a large group how to do presentations, and because again, you have to have that interpersonal. With the kids' presentations, I met with each student, which is what took time, and gave them feedback, and I previewed what they did, and you can't do that for 500 people. But I think you could do some learning podcasts, for lack of a better word, some smaller things, yes.
So I don't want to put ideas in your head or give you a new job title, but the thing that I had in mind is that I don't know that there is anybody who's better rehearsed in the critical concerns. So have you ever considered being a teacher of the critical concerns to the Mercy community?
Well, that's a raw question. It's a question I haven't thought about. I think, again, I could do little lecture kind of stuff. I just feel like there's a difference between a lecture and a teacher, so I could do a teaching lecture. I think it's different than a teaching course. I don't know if that answers the question, but
because I envision that, if you were to get yourself talking about immigration for the day, you bring in a bunch of alumni or people from the Mercy community, or maybe even a broader audience that they want to also talk about, say, immigration that particular day. It could go from a lecture into a conversation into a lesson altogether.
Oh, absolutely. I could see doing things like that. What I couldn't see is like semester courses and grades and assessment and kind of stuff, but certainly exciting, shorter things. Even if you had a conversation and you did some reading and reflection and you came back for the second conversation after you did some homework of sorts.
But I think that's really important, because when it comes to learning doesn't have to take place, I don't think, in a classroom. I don't think that learning has to take place over a semester or a marking period. Learning can take place whenever you want, and I think that as long as people are willing to learn and as long as there's somebody willing to teach,
oh, sure.
where that takes place could be anywhere.
It's kind of the model of professional development. So for teachers, if we're doing professional development, we're getting online and we're finding good speakers and we're listening to other educators, and we're listening to reading and doing some other kind of things. So it's what we actually as teachers do is for our own professional development. Is,
Maybe, I don't know. I think that if we could take a value system like that and spread it on a wider scale, it really could have benefits, because I think that that's one of the things that not just as a local community, but as a country and maybe even as a whole planet, I think that people have gotten away from the ideas of humanism and the ideas of looking out for one another. And I think that we need to start trying to back in that direction. It feels like people have gotten very, very insulated and, I dare to say, selfish.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, and our culture has promoted that. The self. You do this for yourself. It's a problem.
Yeah, I'd like to see a change. I'm just not sure how exactly we get there. But I'm going to put you up there. I'm going to say that maybe you could be one of the ways to bridge that gap.
You're giving me homework, are you?
I'm not giving you homework. I'm giving you ideas.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want to keep you all day, Sister Karlien, but I really do appreciate you coming by, and I'm really glad that we had a chance to talk. But
Well, this is fun and painless.
yeah, right? It's not so bad, is it?
It's better not to prepare. It's better just to
You got
have
it.
it be organic and. So I'm talking right off the top of my head and heart. So that's
I'm
what
doing
you
the
got.
same.
You got. That's good.
Well, hopefully it won't be another 4 months till I see you.
Exactly.
Because I'll tell you what, that's you and Mike Metzer. I hadn't seen you guys in 4 months, and these past couple of days have been awesome. So it's really nice catching up with you again to see you.
I feel the same, Ryan. So.
Well, thanks for doing this.
All right.
Let's wrap it
We'll
up.
do it again. All right. It's blooming warm.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting warm too.